Welcome to this webinar on how to make Google Analytics a powerful marketing tool for your school. I'm Philippe Taza, and I'll be your host. Obviously, some housekeeping items to use for those of you who don't know how to use Zoom, which I'm sure you all do. You can use the Q&A function. You can chat. We'll be recording the session and sending the slides and the recording. Usually we do that tomorrow. So it's a timely subject on analytics because of this countdown that's been imposed upon us by Google, which essentially is indicating that at the end of the month, the older version called Universal Analytics will stop collecting and accruing data in your accounts. And if you don't have a GA4 property set up and tagged on your site, you won't be actually tracking your web analytics data. So today, I've got about 40 or so slides, about 25, 30 minutes of content, which should give us a good 5 to 10 minutes for discussion and Q&A, that was the intention, to provide the forum for a conversation so that we could be a support in your transition to Google Analytics 4. So again, don't be shy to reach out to me. I've got my colleague Rafael, who's also in the background, who will help me assist and filter any questions you might ask. They can come from any spectrum when it comes to the GA4. So in terms of our presentation, we'll talk about the assistant that Google provided us. There's a setup assistant that's there, and there's some pros and some cons to that. The benefits of setting up conversion events in Google Analytics 4, using GA4 to understand your audience and the ROI of your marketing. And at the end, one of my preferred subjects, I want to talk about attribution and attribution models, and why do you care? So you've seen this countdown. It's imminent. It's been on for a while. And essentially what they're trying to do is get as many Google Analytics properties and views to migrate over to GA4, and they've provided us this setup assistant. So if you click on the setup assistant, there's a process which we'll go through in a moment, but we wanted to kind of put together a simple list of pros and cons so that you can understand what's actually entailed behind the scenes of this assistant. Well, the pro is that it'll create the property for you very quickly, and depending on the tracking code you already have on your website, you may, without any work on that tracking code, start and continue to collect data in GA4 without any intervention. I say that with a bit of a disclaimer because it really depends the type of code you have. In a lot of cases, we use Google Tag Manager to enrich the Google Analytics accounts with data. So it's quite important that if you think it'll track on its own, that you go and check. So that's one benefit, that it should be easier to set up the property. And of course, it'll add the time zone and some basic configuration, like the Google Ads link will also be there. But beyond that, all of the custom settings you've done, internal traffic filtering, website goals, which now are different technology called conversion events, those won't be there. Any audiences you had, any custom segments you had, all that's going to require manual intervention. So besides creating an account in GA4 through the setup assistant, that's really all it's going to do for you. So it'll create an account for you easily, but all the settings, all the configuration, you got to do that manually. So if you go ahead and click on the setup assistant process, you can get started, and it's going to ask you to authorize Google to automatically create it for you. And as you can see here in the black heading, automatically set up a basic GA4 property enabled. So this option, if it's enabled, it will create it for you. That's as far as it goes. And in through the process, though, what's interesting about the assistant is that when you drill down in the process here, it actually gives you a completion progress bar that you can see at the left-hand side of this slide. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the different components of the configuration that you should be working on manually. There's nothing automated about the setup. It's got to be done manually. And as you scroll down to the process, it'll help you mark as complete things that you've done manually. And at the end of the process, all of these actions will be done. So anyhow, the setup assistant is useful to create your account as a GA4 property, and that's about all. So just be cautious. Don't think that because you've decided to enable the assistant that all your problems are going to go away and that all of your reports and tracking will actually work as it was in the older Universal Analytics version. Now, in terms of one of the nuances or changes between the two products or the two technologies, this is something that I've been really vocal about over the years. I remember the first webinar I did when I started the company 15 years ago was on this topic on analytics, and one of the first slides was about website goals. So the principle is quite simple. The actions you want users to take on your website should be translated into conversion events. And these conversion events, as you can see, you can determine which of the events are actual conversions and which are not. And that's a different, one of the key differences between the two technologies is that GA4 is all about tracking events. And by default, there are many events that exist, like clicks, for example, like page view, for example, but those aren't necessarily conversions. The system is accruing thousands and thousands of clicks, and they're not all conversions. So you can actually choose which of these events are actually conversions with the little blue or yes, no type of toggle. And you can actually configure custom or custom event names and events that you can actually mark as a conversion or as non-conversion, depending on what you want to do with this. So GA4 is very versatile, a lot more flexible, a lot more powerful than what UA could do, but it requires that you do more technically to get what you want out of the system, out of the reports. And these events should be tied to specific CTAs you have, and they should be marked as conversions. And you can track, there's probably no limit to what can be tracked in terms of conversion events, except your imagination. You can have thank you pages, you can have clicks on specific calls to action. Let's say one of your forms does not redirect the users to a thank you page, which is typically a best practice, but let's say it didn't. Some systems, some CRMs, and some student information systems have difficulty in this area. Well, you can actually track the submit button of the form, whether it's called submit or something different, that's not really important, but you can actually track the measure of how frequently that button is clicked on and determine that's a conversion event, or a link to a file being downloaded, or a video that's viewed. So there's lots of flexibility in terms of the things you could do in terms of tracking conversion events and customizing them to fit your organization's need. So we're going to launch our first poll. We just want to know how many of you did set up the your GA4 property. How many haven't set up the property? This morning we had about a third that did, and a bit more than half that didn't. We always run the webinar for different time zones twice in the day. So let me see what we're going to get here. I'll give you a few more seconds. 5 more. Okay, great. Let's close the poll and share the results. So yeah, so 40% did, 30 didn't, and 30 don't know. So somewhat similar to this morning. Actually, that surprised me today. I was surprised that not more people, considering all of the awareness that Google provided to GA4. It's been leading for over a year now. They've been talking about the migration. I'm surprised that not more of you have done this, but I guess that's why you're on this webinar. So let's talk about some of the benefits of setting up conversion events in Google Analytics 4. So some basic concepts. Look, this is pretty straightforward. You've got your website and you're generating traffic and being visible across multiple channels, social media, your email, SEO with organic search, your ads, your referrals. And when people land on your site, technically you should have multiple calls to action to engage the users and the audience depending on where they are in the funnel. And these examples of CTAs are common in our sector. When users engage with these CTAs, they'll become inquiries, they'll become applicants, they'll become enrolled students. Essentially, that's the principle. There could be other CTAs that are related to other personas or other audiences that your sites might have, but conceptually, that's how digital marketing supports student recruitment. The other part of the definition aspects that I want to share today are some of these channels. So you'll notice that this taxonomy of channels will be visible in some of the acquisition reports. So you have some definitions. Some are the same from the other Universal Analytics version, like paid search, like organic search, but some are new. Organic social, that's a new one that's been provided out of the box. Also, the cross network is also something that's new. But in terms of what are channels, years ago, before channels came into play, and I'm going to say it came into play about 7 or 8 years ago, sources were the only type of data that was relevant in terms of traffic going to the site. And a site could have hundreds of sources of traffic. So what Google decided to do was to group these similar sources into channels. So if you think of organic social, well, that's all of your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok, your LinkedIn, all of that organic, or those organic sources are actually now conglomerated in the organic social channel. The same for organic search. That relates to search engines like Google, Bing, Yahoo, Baidu, and others. So it provides you a more concise list of traffic visibility, and you can drill down into that channel and see all the underlying sources to understand. So that's why I wanted to spend a bit of time to explain this. And a lot of the reports will give you the ability to toggle between the default channel groupings that you're seeing here with campaigns, with source, with medium, which are all similar in terms of their nature. Okay, now one of the benefits and one of the major improvements that I feel is remarkable in GA4 is the real-time reporting. Now, it was available in the old version, but this new one is a lot more powerful, a lot more versatile. So it'll give you, with a 30-minute look-back window, visibility on who's active on your site now, giving you data on geography, sources, content, conversions, all these things that are happening now. And we tend to use it quite regularly at the agency to test different tags. Like, for instance, this tracking business of conversions is a bit more complicated than it used to be, and often we have to rely on Google Tag Manager. And I know it goes beyond the scope of this webinar to talk about GTM in detail, but we use Tag Manager to enrich the data that we can actually collect and parse into Google Analytics. And in a lot of cases, websites, they evolve, they change, they're modified. So we have to maintain the tracking and reporting that is available for this organization. So we test any event that we set up, whether it's a conversion event or a non-conversion event, we test it, and we'll do this with this report. So what we'll do is we'll go into incognito browser, launch the site, do what we're supposed to do, and see if we're getting in real time the visibility on what we intended to measure. And in this particular case, we had a conversion called lead free assessment that we wanted to validate whether or not it was actually working. So that's one benefit of the real-time report. The other one that I really liked, it's a new feature where you can actually compare segments of users. And in the web analytics or digital analytics field, it's all about segmentation, because when you look at data at the aggregate top level, it can be very misleading. So look at this example here. On the left, the blue is all users, and on the orange, it's only users from the US. And what's interesting is that the traffic used by device desktop at the aggregate level is 61.5%, but in the US, it's only 0.25%, 25%. So it's very different. So depending on what you're running at this time, if you're running a promotion or you have different initiatives, and you want to make sure that you understand the users that come to your site, how are they coming to your site, with what kind of devices, as this example, and the comparison tool is quite powerful. I can't list all the dimensions, there's many, but you can compare with all kinds of aspects your real-time traffic. And this is quite useful to analyze whether or not things that were intended are actually going as planned, and that you are catering to the users the way that they want to be catered specifically. Another benefit is all of the AI-driven insights and recommendations. So these are coming in because we have conversion events enabled. And it's telling us in these three cards that a third of our conversions came from Google Organic, that Google Organic appeared in 64% of the conversion paths. And we'll talk about conversion paths at length when we talk about attribution. And we also have an insight around Google organic search, being at 38% the last touch point, and we'll talk about touch points of conversion events. So these insights are super valuable to make sure that the marketing that we're doing is actually yielding the outcomes that we want. And these insights are generated as long as you enable them in GA4 as a setup. The other thing that's interesting is that there are suggested for you reports, and there are cards. And in this particular property, there are many cards, which is why we did a bit of a GIF so you can see the actual carousel. But the system is trying to recommend things, make things easier for you to find based on your behavior when you're in the system. And then you can actually drill down and go and look at that particular card and that report as one specific data set. So the suggestions for you cards are also quite interesting and quite powerful. And it's the artificial intelligence at play within the GA4 environment. Now, here, the next few slides are about using GA4 to understand the audience or your audience and the ROI or return on investment of your marketing. Now, this demographics report provides you visibility on, yes, traffic by country, but also there's some interest signals that are provided, some age signals that are provided. And these signals will be available to you if you activate Google Signals data collection in the setup. So again, this is another example that the setup assistant doesn't do all this for you automatically. You can pick and choose what you want to enable. And the way this works is that Google, it tracks us online, and that's not a surprise. And depending on what you do and what videos you watch and sites you actually consume, you leave traces and breadcrumbs, and these breadcrumbs are used to provide data and attributes in terms of your audience in this particular report. Now, you can also, once you've set up conversion events, you can look at them for any date range, and you can compare if you want to. You can also segment if you want to, but you can look at them just simply. I want to know, how many conversions have I had in the month of May? Boom. You go to the engagement conversion report, and there it is. If you want to correlate these conversion events to specific channels, and these are the channels that I provided in terms of their definitions earlier, we can correlate for each channel how many conversion events were generated. And I can decide to choose in the top right-hand corner of that far right-hand table where it says all events. I can pick it and decide which event is actually being generated. For instance, row number 5, organic social, we got 47 conversions as a whole. Well, I can drill down to understand which conversion actually were generated from organic social specifically. And this same type of data, I can leverage it by geography, by technology, by device, by browser. All this stuff was available in Universal Analytics, just slightly different interface and taxonomy, but fairly straightforward in terms of comparison and in terms of using these reports to understand the audience and its behavior. But obviously, these conversion events that you see only come up because we set them up in the system. If you don't set them up, these columns are blank. So if you want to really understand what the ROI of your social media initiatives are, or your SEO strategy is, yes, you'll see traffic coming in, but if you want to see actual relationships to bums and seats, you've got to set up conversion events. And the same applies to the landing page report. We can see which pages generate most conversions. Row number 2, that's the home page. That's how that is. And row number 5, that's someone or users that chose not to be tracked, because that's also something that we're facing. Some users decide to opt out of being tracked when they come to your website. So you can monitor that activity in that report or those reports in terms of conversion. So let's launch number 2, the poll number 2. We're just trying to understand from our audience today the frequency by which you actually go in there and start poking around and understanding data that's coming into your reports. And I want to reiterate, if you have questions, please put them in there. We've got a few more slides to go, and then we'll have time to answer them. I want to make sure that you get the most out of the session and that we have all your questions answered. Okay, let's close the poll and let's see. So monthly, I'm happy to see that half of you actually go in there once a month. I think that's kind of the bare minimum. Spend 20 minutes a month, go in there, especially that the interface has changed. You need to kind of reorient yourself with the new version of Google Analytics. So once a month, I think that's the minimum. Nice to see that some of you go in daily. Yearly, well, maybe a bit more. It obviously depends the level at which you are in the organization, but I'm happy to see that only a few of you are never going in. And hopefully after you heard me preach the good things about GA, that you will at least go once a month. Let's stop sharing that and let's move on to the last section of the deck, attribution. So attribution is about understanding who gets the credit for the action. That's the basic definition of attribution. Unfortunately, attribution in general is not simple, because people and consumers aren't all impulsive. they will bounce around, research you, look for you online on your website, go to your social media, maybe engage with some ads, look at your email that you're sending. So there's multiple touch points, and these touch points all play a role in determining the attribution and who should get the credit. Now, the most common model is the last click model, because Google is trying to favor Google Ads. And usually when you use Google Ads, users click on an ad, they're sent to a landing page, and the landing page is there to have them convert. So they want to favor that type of advertising model, which is fine. So that's a popular model. You can within the reports play with different models and compare the statistics. That's quite cool about GA4. And the data-driven attribution model is also quite useful in understanding touch points. So I took this text directly from the knowledge base article that you see the link. I couldn't find a better way to express this to you. So let me read this. The conversion paths report has two sections. The top section, which is the data visualization, and the bottom section, which is the data table. The data visualization helps you quickly see which channels initiate, assist, and close conversions. The data table shows you the path users take to complete conversions. And the point I like the most about this statement is helps you quickly see which channels initiate, assist, and close conversions. And that's a really important principle. And you see that there's three categories of touch points. So the early touch points initiate, mid touch points assist, and late touch points close conversions. So this is an important principle. And if you start studying this, what you'll notice is that even though, like this example is probably the best way to explain it to you, when we talk about advertising, the two big buckets is, we either going to do stuff on Google and search, or social, mostly with Meta, but now there's also TikTok, and of course there's LinkedIn, depending on where you're situated and who you're trying to engage with. But there's a distinct understanding that the intent is different between search and social. Search, the person is actively searching for something, whereas social, it's more like display advertising, which is disrupting the user's flow. So the quality is different, and the yield is different between those inquiries and enrollment. But what's interesting is when you start studying this, you realize that a lot of your conversions are actually initiated through social, but are closed through search. And that's what this report is telling us, a bit like this diagram. Now, being Canadian, hockey is in our blood. The first player's got the puck. The player passes it to the second player, who then scores the goal. So if I go back this example, social is playing a role. So all of the early touch points is like the first player who's passing the puck to the late touch points, who's scoring the goal. And that's really insightful, because before these technologies were available, we would look at direct attribution of, okay, well, I've got leads coming in from this campaign, and I'm parsing the source of those leads in our CRM, so I know that this person came from this campaign, and does he or she actually enroll? And we were looking at from a linear point of view. But the reality is that even though the CRM data may indicate that, yes, Google converts at a higher rate than Meta does, it's a bit misleading, because you have a lot of those Google conversions that were initiated by Meta and vice versa. Again, this is an example that I'm showing you and explaining to you to express the need that you have to study your own systems and your own environment and your own consumers, because first of all, not every client has this type of result. And number two, if you don't include this in your analysis, you might be actually cutting out a whole new flow of potential students that you can be catering to by adding into your marketing mix initiatives that might, at the face value, not provide the yield that you want. So essentially, that's the power of the touch point analysis that I wanted to highlight. And what's also interesting is when you look at the bottom part of the table and you look at the paths. So look at, let's say, the third row. The third row is telling us that 46 conversions came from 3 organic search interactions and 3 referral interactions. So there were 6 touch points in total, and that pattern yielded 46 conversions. And conversions can be someone inquiring, someone applying, someone, any type of goal that you've defined for your website. So you see that there's paths that occur and that actually occur through multiple channels, and they work collectively. The other thing that's interesting is in this report, I'm showing you the default channel grouping, but I can toggle that to a campaign, to source, to medium, to really drill down and segment the data based on what I'm trying to analyze. So that's one thing that's interesting about this. The other is touch points to conversion, which is the far right-hand column. On average, almost 4 touch points. So they did 4 things across an average of 6 days before they converted. So think about that. If you really process this, it's going to probably make you rethink some of the tactics that you deploy to launch to recruitment. We know that we want ads and we want traffic to be visible now and conversions to happen now. We all want that. But the reality is that that's not what's happening all the time. Yes, some are. The first row, many of them did. They came back directly and converted within the first day. Absolutely. But that's only about, 20% or 30% of the actual conversions. The other 70% converted over a longer time span and multiple touch points. You can decide to populate these reports and this analysis for all of your conversion events or only one. So I can pick and choose the one I want to see and update this table accordingly. So we can really analyze one conversion event in particular to understand how that one is actually being generated based on the marketing activity that we do. And truthfully, that's how you should approach it. You should segment. Obviously, you need a certain amount of volume to slice and dice data extensively. But if you do that, you really can start understanding your all of the different audiences that you've got and how they're actually engaging with your website. So this is another example of conversion paths through Medium and how things are changing. You've got days to conversion, it's just under 2. And touch points is under 3. So very different. And you might see different behavior during times of the year. You might have times of the year where things are a lot quicker, or where the velocity is accelerated. Other times might be slower. So hopefully these reports shed some light in terms of what's possible and how you can use them to analyze performance. Obviously, look, I've only touched the surface. There's so many more things that GA4 can provide you, but I wanted to go with the essentials and provide you the right tools so that you can be effective immediately. So in terms of recap, don't rely exclusively on the GA4 assistant to set up your property. Monitor your insights and recommendations regularly, and some of them are provided to you automatically by Google. Set up conversion events. That's so important. It's going to make so much of a difference in terms of your data and what you can get out of the tool. Spend time studying which channels initiate, assist, and close conversions, and spend time studying conversion paths. We obviously are at your disposal. If you'd like us to take a peek at your current GA4 property and tell you how it's configured and provide you some ideas as to how maybe you want to make it better. By all means, you can reach out to my colleague Scott or myself or some of our other teammates in the team. I also want to highlight that we provided you a handout. There's in the chat. There's my colleague will provide that to you shortly in the chat. A Google Analytics checklist that you can use. So you can use that as a means to just check if you're doing all the right things and verify if your setup is as complete as it can be. So we have a few minutes left. I'd love to be able to answer any difficult questions that you might have for me. So you can just go into the chat or the question pane. By all means, put them in there, and I'd be happy to answer them. One question that we have is on the touch points. They were asking me, like, how does this actually work? Well, if you set up conversion events, then you'll have these reports. Let me show you here. These reports will come up. If you don't have any conversion events configured, they won't come up. So that's really a differentiator in terms of how, if you do take the time to set them up, the reports are going to be a lot richer and more of them will come up. So that was one of the key questions that we had today. Obviously, I hope that you take the time to configure your properties. You spend a bit more time analyzing, considering the amount of money and investments that the sector does in marketing. Spending a bit of time analyzing the performance of that investment makes a lot of sense. So I want to reiterate that we'll be sending you the slides and the recording tomorrow. And I want to thank you for taking the time to listening to this webinar on GA4, and hopefully it was useful. Thank you very much for your time.